Okay, excellent. Okay, well, first of all, I would like to welcome you to the sixth annual FoodTreX Online Food Travel Summit. I'm very excited to be hosting this summit for you today in a very strange time for the industry and for the world. But thanks to the availability of online technology and the fact that we can all still be together, things like this are possible. FoodTreX, if you're not aware, stands for Food Travel Excellence, and it really stands for everything that our association does for you and for our industry. We're committed to excellence and innovation, and you can always count on us to bring you the highest quality content regarding anything having to do with the food and beverage tourism industry. Now, let's get started for the first session today, exploring the latest food travel industry trends. Okay, what you'll learn today, obviously, we're going to look at some of the trends that we have seen for 2020, but we're also going to be providing some commentary on what's been happening before the pandemic and also post the pandemic. And you can see this is what it's going to look like on some of the slides. We're going to have the pre pandemic comments on the left and the post pandemic comments on the right. Now, if you're not familiar with the World Food Travel Association, we were founded in 2003 and we're recognized as the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. And each year, we reach almost 200,000 professionals in 150 countries. And we lead with innovation, and that's really what we're known for. So almost every first that our industry has seen, we have brought that to you. And what do we do? Well, our mission is to preserve and promote culinary cultures through hospitality and tourism. And we do that through our product portfolios, which are education, training, research, events, and consulting. And we're also known for managing the world's largest community of food and beverage tourism professionals. And I'll talk more about that towards the end. Now, before I start any presentation, I always like to make sure that we're always on the same page when it comes to the definition of food tourism. Now, someone has just told me that my slides are not showing, so let me make sure. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. All right, that should be better. My apologies there. So I always like to make sure that we have a common understanding of the definition of food tourism. Now, there are many different kinds of definitions available. Some of them are quite long and involved, and some of them have to do with things like room nights and how much people spend and where people go. And we find that really complicated. We like to keep things simple, and it's always best to keep things simple. And really, food and beverage tourism is all about traveling for a taste of place in order to get a sense of place. And that for us is the most simple and the most essential, really, essence of what our industry is all about. Now, the trends and predictions I'll be talking about today, most of them come from our 2020 Food Travel Monitor, which was released in January of this year. And obviously, the pandemic has happened since then, and that's why we're tempering some of the comments today with some of those predictions of things that as we see them changing. So, first of all, we see that interest in food and drink is continuing to grow. And sorry, let me just hide the controls there. They're kind of in the way. There we go. Now, in our 2020 research, we discovered that almost two-thirds of travelers were saying food and drink are more important to them now than 5 years ago. And that's a tremendous statistic. And we think that that's going to continue to happen. People really have not lost their interest in food. And if anything, they've had more time to learn about it right now from staying at home. We've been cooking, we've been looking at recipes, we've been watching cooking videos and what people are making in their kitchens around the world. And we think this is also an opportunity for people to learn more about their local culinary cultures, which, they say that every uh, storm or every cloud has a silver lining. Well, perhaps that is the silver lining here, is that we're remembering our culinary cultures. Now, food tourism is holding strong and steady. Now, before the pandemic, 53% of all leisure travelers were considered culinary travelers according to our definition, and that's up from about 45% in 2016. So that's a tremendous statistic. That's over half of all leisure travelers. Now, how's that changing? Well, we think food has always been a major driver with travelers and with destination choice and our activities when we're traveling, and we predict that it will continue to be a major driver. Now, in our research that came out in January, we were telling people to keep an eye on Mexico and China. And while the growth in much of the developed world was steady but not really growing, China and Mexico were soaring. And now we expect that the growth from Mexico and China to decline markedly this year. But there is, again, some silver lining there. We, even though Mexico and China travelers will not be coming as much as they have in the past, we expect instead that there'll be a lot more local and regional travel. So that is still good prognosis that there will be some business to be had. Now, we said before that millennials are making their mark, especially when it comes to food and drink, which are very important for them. Their interest in food and drink is clearly growing. And we expect that to continue and remain constant. We don't really see that changing at all. Now, this was a really interesting find in our 2020 monitor. The Generation Z or Z people who are, well, not more than about 21, 22 years old right now, they were starting to exhibit characteristics of being super foodies. And what do we mean by that? Well, when you have two millennial parents who are already obsessed with food and they're raising a child or children, and they're infusing them with their own values, it stands to reason then that the children would be obsessed even more with food and drink. And we started to see indications in the data that this was really happening, that they were starting to really value food and drink tremendously, even more it was looking like than their parents. And unfortunately, we do think Generation Z will continue to bring opportunities, but unfortunately, probably not the expected growth that we were looking at in the short term. It might take a few more years before we see that growth really picking up. And that's really largely because a lot of these people who were entering the job force are not going to be able to find jobs in the short term. We all know why. And that's unfortunate, but these people are still they're going to be out there, but they're not going to be able to travel as much, or if they are traveling, they won't be able to spend as much as they perhaps to had in mind to do so before. So it's something to think about when you start thinking about your target markets and planning for the future. Now, in our research, we also saw that culinary travelers do more. And you can see from the screenshot here that of all the culinary travelers that we surveyed, which were over 4,500 people around the world, anyone who was a culinary traveler was highly engaged. They were staying longer and they were spending more on a wide variety of activities. And we do think that culinary travelers going forward will continue to exhibit the same type of behaviors and preferences. So just because the travel has slowed down or it will take a while for it to pick up doesn't mean that we won't continue to enjoy these things when things start to normalize. Now, before we were saying that food lovers were seeking active and engaging experiences. And again, you can see some of the activities that they like to do here. So it wasn't just about the restaurants, but it was the food trucks, the events, the tours, the food factories, cooking classes, and so on. And we do think that food loving travelers will continue to pursue these same types of experiences when things start to turn around. Now, we saw that travelers want variety. The top psychoculinary profile for all generations and for all countries except for France was eclectic, and it's not about gourmet. Now, if you're not familiar with psychoculinary profiling, it's a methodology that our association released in 2010. And what it means is we had really noticed that people were not exhibiting the same kinds of behaviors. Here's an example. Your friend tells you there's a new Japanese restaurant that opens down the street. They love it, they rave about it. You decide to go, and you don't see what your friend saw in it. That is explained by the different expectations that you each have, and that's what psychoculinary profiling is all about. So, eclectic was the number one psychoculinary profile for 2020, which actually replaced authentic, which was very interesting to see. But it wasn't about just the restaurants. Again, it was about all of these different types of experiences. And we do expect this kind of behavior to continue. Now you can see there, eclectic is in first place, which means that people are liking a wide variety of experiences, a wide variety of cuisines. Authentic is now in second place, and localist is in third place. And for those of you who do serve the gourmet market, you can see gourmet is down there, kind of just below half. It was 18% in 2016. It's 19% now in 2020, and it's still not a majority. Now, people can have up to 3 psychoculinary profiles, so they might be gourmet and something else. That's something to take into consideration. Now, we also discovered in this year's research that beer and wine travelers were starting to overlap. Now, in the past, we saw that people would look at beer travelers with a certain stereotype or wine travelers with a certain stereotype. And those stereotypes now need to be thrown away because beer lovers are enjoying wine lovers are enjoying beer, and it's mix and match now. So you can't really say that beer travelers or wine travelers themselves alone are just one thing. And we think that's going to continue to happen. We think that people will continue to enjoy both products and experiences. Now, we are quite excited to tell you that beverage tourism is prepared for growth. We saw in the 2020 research that only a small percentage of those people who consider themselves wine or beer lovers were actually visiting the wineries, the breweries, the wine trails, the beer tours, wine and beer events, and so on. And what percentage exactly? Well, it depends on whether it was wine or beer. It depended on what country, and it depended on the activity as well, but you're really looking kind of in the 22 to 30% range of travelers who are actually participating in that. So that means that maybe 70% of wine lovers were not engaging in any of these activities. Very interesting. And I think it means that there's tremendous opportunity to continue to develop the products and experiences that relate to craft beers, boutique wines, and artisanal spirits. Now, special diets are here to stay. I'm sure that many of you have noticed the huge rise in this, but especially among vegetarian and vegan interests. Not only to mention that, but also kosher, halal, gluten-free, and so on. Travelers were actively seeking those products and experiences that suited their dietary and allergy requirements. So a vegan doesn't stop being a vegan just because they're on holiday in Spain or Argentina. And we expect that to continue. Like we said, this is here to stay. People are not going to change their special diets or grow out of their food allergies. So it's something that we think continues to have potential for growth. Now, knowing about food and beverage was a really big motivator to action. So we could see here in our 2020 research that those travelers who consider themselves knowledgeable about food and drink participated in 50% more different kinds of travel activities. That's tremendous. But even those people who didn't consider themselves knowledgeable about food and drink wanted to learn about it both before and during and after a trip. So that means that there is tremendous opportunity to educate them while they're traveling as well. And we do think that this will continue, but we also believe that there needs to be a heavy emphasis on the pre trip customer journey stage. That means getting people information about the activities before they actually go to take the activity. Now, food travel does start at home. So, 64% of people that we surveyed, of those local residents, wanted to know more about the local food and history and heritage in their area. And they also said that when friends and family visit them, 70% of those leisure travelers wanted to eat local foods with them. So that's really tremendous. So what we're seeing is an opportunity to educate local residents about their own culinary cultures. Many people still don't know about the food and drink products or history or recipes where they live. So even if we are serving tourists, you might want to think about locals as a target market, and especially like we were saying before, that a lot of the expected surge in travel is going to be local and regional. This is a perfect example of that. So we do think that the time is right to increase awareness of culinary cultures, and we are seeing that many destinations and companies like tour operators are actually doing this. Now, this was another really interesting find in our 2020 research. The words local and authentic really stopped having meaning for leisure travelers. People expect local and authentic as a given now. That is the default experience. You don't need to mention that because people are expecting that anyway. And in fact, when people were asked about their perception of local and authentic, it was actually starting to have a negative effect because everyone is using it. Everyone is using those words. So there's too much noise in the market. Those words have lost much of their marketing cachet. So how do you get around that? Well, you use the actual place name. So you talk about, uh, I don't know, Loire Valley something as opposed to local French wines. You see, so you actually have to use those place names. You get back to that terroir, and we expect this reaction or this position to continue. If local and authentic are becoming expected, which is great to hear, then we need to start being more creative about how we're using those terms in marketing. Now, it's interesting to see that younger people were driving adventure and experimentation in cuisine. So the younger the people were, the more of the respondents were considering themselves to be either innovative or adventurer psychoculinary profiles, and those are the people who are looking to do more interesting things with food. So they might do more molecular gastronomy or that type of thing. And you were starting to see a lot of young people posting pictures of extremely creative food dishes on their Instagram accounts, or younger people saving up to do Michelin star restaurants. And we're not sure that this behavior is going to continue as quickly as it was or as much as it was before, especially if there's significantly less disposable income right now. People may be prioritizing and not necessarily expending money on things that are fun and whimsical. Now, social media and sharing are still strong, but there have been some interesting challenges recently. You may have heard some of the stories out there about Facebook and Instagram that have lost a little bit of their allure. And we saw in one major market, notably the United Kingdom, that the use of Facebook has declined by 1/3, and that is tremendous. You don't expect a big powerhouse like Facebook to lose market share, but it did, at least in the United Kingdom. And that has not actually been gained back. So, what are people doing instead? Well, they're going back to friends and family for advice. And what we're seeing is a surge in these peer to peer communities. And what we mean by that is communities that are dedicated for a specific group. WhatsApp, Viber, Slack is another example. We use Slack internally in our organization. Many of you do. Many of you participate in WhatsApp groups. So those are peer-to-peer communities, and we see that growth surging in the next couple of years. Now, sustainability is essential. Consumers who become travelers are making the effort to support those socially responsible businesses. And businesses everywhere need to cater to those traveler expectations. Now, we have been saying this before, and many businesses were doing this, but I think we say in English, the pedal has hit the metal. And what that means is it's time to actually act on those promises. People are more concerned than ever about doing the right thing, about not hurting the environment. You see all the images on the press right now about what cities look like without pollution. And people are going to be expecting you to talk about your commitment to sustainability and what you're doing to help. We also saw, really, for the first major time in our research, that in destination information is critical. So, when people are deciding where to go and what to do, we don't always do it beforehand. So, that's that pre journey, customer journey step. We are making many decisions while we are traveling on the way to the destination, in the destination. Maybe a friend there or a colleague recommends something. So we had planned to go to this restaurant, but then someone recommends something else. So we change our plans. Or maybe we had an afternoon free, but someone recommended the beer tour, and we do that instead. And that is happening much more than ever now. And we think that this will only continue, especially with the advent of 5G telecom. People are accessing videos while they're traveling. They're watching videos, getting ideas. They're going to YouTube, and this means that your marketing job is not done when people get to your destination. So, especially for tour operators who maybe are hoping that someone will discover their food or beverage tour while they're there, but for destination marketers, it's the same kind of thing. Just because someone has made the decision to come to your destination, they've arrived in your destination, you cannot stop marketing to them. Now, we do know that good food and drink lead to trip satisfaction, and that's very important. Those scores that people have after their trip, that does drive more word of mouth, and it drives more tourism. And we do think that there's every indication that this will continue to happen. Now, the industry prognosis, I see with a little typo there, sorry about that. We have 8 recommendations for you. First of all, our love of good food and drink won't change. That's good news. We will continue to love food and drink going forward, and people will continue to look for food and drink experiences. Experiences that require more income might see reduced participation or slower growth, or they might see people substituting one thing for another. So this is something to think about. It is unfortunate, but it is nevertheless what we see happening and what people are even talking about already. We also see a delay in adoption by younger people of new food and drink experiences because of the income factors that we talked about before. People will not have the income necessarily to spend on such luxurious trips, such eccentric trips. Maybe instead of hiking up Mount Everest in Nepal, people might opt for volunteering at a camp or a charity near their home or in their region instead, for example. We are seeing and predicting a greater respect for and interested in those local culinary cultures and sustainability. So, if your business is involved in any way in promoting those local culinary cultures, we think this is fantastic and that will only continue to grow. And if you're not really focused on the culinary cultures, so for example, maybe you're a tour operator and you're just focusing on those fun experiences, you might want to think about tying in something about the culinary culture or the sustainability because it's what people are showing interest in right now. Unfortunately, many of the weaker businesses will unfortunately fail. And this means that those stronger businesses will get stronger. And so that's good for those stronger businesses. But what those weaker businesses might be able to do is to consider a pivot. And what that means is they may be able to consider doing something slightly different, or maybe they add a new product, or maybe they get into a new business altogether, or maybe your business income comes from multiple sources. So maybe you do tours, maybe you're also a graphic designer, maybe you do voiceover narrations as well, and maybe you do translation, for example. Now, this is also important for those destination marketers out there because you need to be able to anticipate these needs for your members or your constituents and be able to serve them and guide them in those changes that they're making. We still see a strong opportunity for product development and diversification, and we had talked about this a lot with the beverages, those craft beers, artisanal wines, and spirits, and that's great to see. But you got to think about besides those specific products, think about experiences as well that maybe involve those products. So we're not saying that you should maybe get into craft brewing or winemaking, but maybe you're delivering those experiences, or maybe you're designing labels for those businesses that are creating those artisanal products. So think creatively, think outside the box when it comes to product development and diversification. If you're a tour operator, it doesn't mean necessarily creating a new tour that focuses on those things. It means looking at consumer demand and preparing your products accordingly. And this is a big one here. Health and safety issues will continue to be of utmost concern. Now, this is an opportunity. Now, many of us in the food and beverage industry will say that health and safety has always been an important part of what we do. And of course, it has been, but it's going to be even more so. And in fact, we've identified that there may be some changes that our industry will need to embrace. And this is the subject of our May 15th Food Travel Talk TV show, where we're looking at food and beverage sampling in food tours and restaurants and wineries and breweries and so on. What will need to change? Will tasting rooms need to have fewer people in them? Will people move from glassware to plastic? Uh, you know, will it change how waiters take your dishes and cutlery away from the table after you're done with the meal? So all of these things are important, and any business owner, tour operator, for example, will need to make sure that you have some kind of a statement about this. So what you're doing and what the vendors that you highlight are doing to focus on health and safety issues. Now, we are in the tourism and hospitality business, and food service dovetails into what we do. And it's just part of every food and beverage tourism experience, the food and drink portion of it. But more than ever, we need to really put the spotlight on the safety of the food and beverage, and also the safety of the actual experience itself. So things like the transportation. Maybe people will be looking for things that aren't necessarily in crowded areas or in city centers, which could be beneficial to those businesses who are operating in more rural locations. And there's going to be new attention finally on contactless market and the disabled. And by contactless, just think about your contactless credit card, where you go to a store and you just show your card, and the chip is read and the money is taken out. So there are people who are not able to travel. They might have a physical disability or possibly even a mental disability, which would prevent them from traveling. So many tour operators have been doing some pivoting, and some of them are doing things like cooking classes online or doing virtual tours of a destination. We've seen virtual tastings, and some tour operators are saying, "Well, I'm never going to make that my own business, my only business. I'm not going to continue to do that after the pandemic is over." But actually, for the disabled market, this is an opportunity. And I'll give you an example. I was at a whiskey distillery in Ireland, and it was in a very old building, and there was maybe 10 or 12 of us going around. And it was because it was an old building, there were stairs, there were narrow passageways, there were low ceilings, and there was no way that anyone in a wheelchair or anyone who had difficulty walking could have done that tour. So what do you do if you have someone who loves whiskey or who is curious about whiskey but could not go on that tour? So you see now what I mean. And also, not just people who have perhaps a disability, but also people who don't want to be in as crowded of an area. There are people who are scared of going into things like big crowds. Imagine a big market like Time Out Lisbon, where thousands of people are sitting there and eating. That scares some people, and it may scare people even more. So now we have an opportunity to develop products and services that meet these customer demands. So really, it's plan, plan, plan right now, or perhaps we could say plan, improve, and prepare. We have written about this subject in some of the publications that we've posted on our website. in our thought leadership section. So we were saying to businesses that now is the time to plan. So don't be complacent. Don't be paralyzed. It's hard to say that, and I know, and I think many of us were in shock for much of the month of March, but we need to now um, adapt to the new normal, at least for the short term, and that means planning. So now that the shock of this experience is starting to go away, we can start to react, and that means planning, looking at your website, looking at your marketing plans, looking at your target markets, developing your products further. Were there tweaks that you wanted to make to your products? Was there a tour that maybe wasn't selling so well? Were people not coming to your restaurant for lunchtime, for example? Now is the time for you to think about those things and to improve. So plan, improve them. So maybe you had always wanted to do better at your social media for your destination, and now it's time that you actually have the time to devote to get better at that, and then prepare, because when travel starts happening again, you want to be ready. You want to be like a horse out of the gate and ready to go. This is not a time to sit back and watch the world go by. It's hard to say that. It is a hard time, but use some of your free time to plan and prepare, and you'll be in a much better position for when this is over. We've also been telling businesses this is a great time to generate leads. So even though people cannot travel right now, it's a great time to maybe release an ebook, or do a free webinar, or maybe give a free online cooking class, but don't just do it and not get anything from it. It's very difficult to charge people for things right now. However, um, you can capture those leads. So you make people register to watch your free cooking class online, for example. And then you have all of those new leads that you can reach out to when people start traveling again. Now, I'd like to offer you some of the resources that we have here at our association. First of all, I encourage you to join our GastroTerra community. It is the world's largest community of food travel trade professionals. It is free to join, and there's also a premium membership option, and there's the link on the screen. But also do follow us on social media. If you're not already following us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, please do so. Our links, our handles are right there on the screen. Now, here's the fun part, some downloads for you. There's the 2020 Food Travel Monitor, the 2020 State of the Food Travel Industry Report, and our 10-step destination guide. Now, the 2020 Food Travel Monitor is the bigger research report. It's more quantitative information, a lot of market research, and we do charge for that. The State of the Food Travel Industry Report, however, is more qualitative content, and that is information that was assembled from surveying our advisors and experts network around the world. That's a smaller report. That's 66 pages this year, and that is free. And you can get both of those reports if you go to our website and you click on the research tab. And then our 10-step destination guide to food tourism development, it is a bit.ly link, so bit.ly/WFTA 10 step, and that is case sensitive. So that is it for the trends and the prognosis for what's happening right now. And I see that we have some questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I'm going to have a look at some of the questions. Okay, there were just some people who had some problems with sound before. Okay, great. Well, I would encourage you to put any questions you have in the window, in the chat window right now. If you can't find the chat window, it's in the lower control panel. There's a button that says chat, and all you need to do is press that, and then you can send chat messages right in there. Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions right now. Here's a couple questions. Great. Do you believe that groups doing food tours will drop to 4 or less? That's an interesting question. We've seen that there's quite a few food tours or beverage tours that have been operating where participants have been 12, 14, 16, even 20 people. And yes, we definitely expect the number of people on these tours to drop. When people are nervous about traveling, they may not want to be in a group with 16 or 20 people they don't know or going through a crowded market. It's much easier in a smaller group to customize as well. So if you have four people, or maybe it's just two people, a husband and wife, for example, or two partners, or a small family of four or six people, it's very easy to customize. It's great. It's not only is it easy to customize, but it's also easy to make changes on the fly. So if changes are needed, then it's very easy to do that with a small group. But it also gives people that sense of traveling with people they know and trust. And yes, we absolutely see that for at least the near future. Could we please mention which markets were surveyed for the list of 8 recommendations? Yes. Um, the 2020 Food Travel Monitor looked at the United States, it looked at the United Kingdom, China, India, France, and Canada. So 6 countries total. We had a few more countries last year, but we focused really on the major markets of those 2016 markets. We went back and then drilled down and looked further, and we also added Canada this year. Oh, and Mexico as well. Let's see. The next episode of Food Travel Talk is the 15th of May. Yes, that's correct. It is on May the 15th. And if you go to the events tab on our website, and you'll see the event calendar there on the second place, you click on that, and it will tell you information about who's talking, and you can register right there for it. It's free for everyone to attend, and it will be live. Let's see. We have another question about China and Mexico as indicators. Um, the reason China and Mexico were addressed is because they were countries that were surveyed in the report. And we also asked people about we looked at both inbound and outbound. And for outbound, Mexico and China had a tremendous growth curve. It was like this. I mean, the Chinese travelers were growing at a rate of not. It was crazy. But like I said, I think because of what's happened, we are seeing, obviously no one's traveling. I would say Chinese travelers will probably go like this, and then maybe give it 4 or 6 months, then they might start to continue to increase more. But I don't see China and Mexico traveling a lot anytime soon. Remember, people won't not have the money as well. And people aren't buying things. Trade has largely stopped except for healthcare and food production. So people aren't being paid. That means that they won't have the money to travel. Many of them won't have the money to travel. Was China for outbound as well as inbound or local? China was for outbound. Another question. We mentioned that authentic and local have lost much of their meaning from overuse, with large corporations like McDonald's co-opting these terms. How do you see destinations and organizations that do not have a brand name recognition countering this? Would you agree that the term experience has lost much of its value for the same reason? Well, like I was saying, local and authentic are overused, and I would start using place names because a place name is something that is much more unique than just saying, experience our authentic Mexican cuisine. Well, what does that mean? Mexican, Tex-Mex, California Mex, or some other strange permutation on what is Mexican cuisine, for example. So, but if you start talking about the Oaxacan cuisine, for example, which is a region of Mexico, then people know specifically what you're talking about. And then in terms of experience, I think experience is still a good word, but one of the other things that we are telling people to work on right now is to focus on the faces behind the places. So those people who make up the what makes the destination special. So that would be the chocolate maker, the bread maker, the wine maker, the beer maker, the chef. Those kinds of people are unique to everywhere on the planet. So the crazy chef who maybe the chef wears a green chef hat, I don't know, but or there was a restaurant in New York City that was known for having extremely rude service, but that's why people went there, and those kinds of things. So those people make up, they're the fabric of the destination, and that is what is unique. So talk about those things as being unique as opposed to as opposed to just local and authentic or unique. Unique is another one that was overused. Have we seen an increase in the use of technology in food tourism? For example, self-guided apps. Absolutely. Technology is being used by everyone in travel, not just food and beverage loving travelers. Obviously, with our smartphones, that is the most obvious thing. But uh, think about using Google Translate when you travel. I use Google Translate for menus when I travel, and Google, or well, my Android phone has a feature that I can actually use the camera and place it on the menu, and it will translate in real time in the camera lens what the words are from that language. So let's say I'm looking at a menu in Polish. I speak nothing of Polish. I have no idea, and I put my camera over the menu and I am reading the English words so I can understand. That is one example. You heard about Google Glasses a few years ago where people were wearing glasses and they could see things that would appear in the glasses, and it would tell them what the business was, like it could be a restaurant, the type of cuisine, the type of ratings it had, and so on. So absolutely, technology will continue to be important. One thing that I am not really a fan of is the use of robots in restaurants. I hope that it stays a fad and doesn't become too pervasive, because you can't ask the robot where their favorite hiking or walking trail is, right? There's no conversation that you're going to have with a robot, at least not right now. And that is a shame. But it's also a gimmick, right? People go to those places for that specific gimmick experience. And you're seeing this a lot in Japan right now. Do you expect less of a demand for exotic food experiences for, let's say, Western travelers to India, Asia, or do you think Europe and Canada will be more popular? Well, it goes back to what I was saying about people focusing on local and regional. So, Ruby, I believe you're in Eastern Canada, if I remember from looking at the registrations. And that what I would do, yeah, she's in Montreal, fantastic. I would focus on Quebec, Ontario, and New England in the United States, and really only there. So maybe your market before was all of the United States and all of Canada, and maybe even France, and maybe even the United Kingdom and Ireland and Scotland. And now maybe you just need to focus on Quebec, Ontario, the maritime provinces of Canada, as well, our friends in Nova Scotia, who we love and pray for right now. Uh, but that's going to be your market in the short term. The same thing anywhere in the world. If you are in India right now, you should be looking at travelers from Indonesia and Singapore and Dubai, right? As opposed to trying to bring people from the UK and Australia and everywhere else. Focus on local and regional, at least for the short term. And then we'll all know when things are opening up enough. If the virus is gone, if there's a vaccine or treatments for it, and people start to travel further afield, then you'll be able to go back to your original marketing plans. But it may mean some shift in some marketing planning right now. I think we have time for one last question if anyone would like to pose another question. No? Well, it looks like we're done for session one. So thank you all for attending. It was a pleasure. I would love talking about food tourism. So I'm so excited that you were all able to join this session, and you're able to join us for the Online Food Travel Summit. And in just 15 minutes, we will be hearing from Anna Blaua, who is the PR executive for the Riga Tourism Development Bureau. And anyone who has a paid registration will be attending that. And just make sure that you join the next Zoom link for that meeting. Great. Thanks, everyone. Stay